My name is Dr. Celeste Rosek. For 734 Martian souls, my world had been a landscape of numbers, a silent, one-sided conversation with the deep, cold heart of a dead planet. From the sterile confines of my seismology station at R's base, a tiny, pressurized bubble of human endeavor in the vast, Oka desolation of the Mariner Valley, I listened. My colleagues charted the stars or analyzed the thin, carbon dioxide atmosphere, their eyes turned outward and upward, searching for the future. Mine were turned down, into the crushing dark, into the billion-year-old silence of the planet's mantle, searching for the past. I was a cartographer of the unseen, my job to map the hidden strata and forgotten mineral deposits, a thankless task of listening for the faintest whispers of microbial history in a world of epic, indifferent geology. Most days, the silence was absolute. The data streams were a flat, predictable line, the occasional Marsquake a familiar, jagged spike in the otherwise placid readout. It was a routine of magnificent monotony. I would wake, drink my recycled coffee, and spend 12 hours translating the planet's sleep into geological charts that no one but me would ever truly appreciate. My only real companion was a ghost. On a small, personal drive, I kept the complete works of my mentor, Callineus, the brilliant, disgraced explorer who had vanished a century ago chasing a shadow. His final, ridiculed thesis on unnatural gravitational and geological signatures was my Bible, a text of faith in a world of cold, hard facts. He had believed that the universe left clues, that truly advanced civilizations wouldn't build monuments of stone, but would carve their legacies into the very fabric of space and geology. They had called him a romantic, a fool. I called him an inspiration. It all changed with the ghost in my machine. It began as a flicker, a statistical deviation so small it was almost imperceptible. A whisper in the planet's sleep. My deep Earth resonance scans, which I had programmed with some of Kalen's more esoteric search algorithms, returned an error. Not an equipment malfunction, but a data void. An entire sector of my geological map, 100 meters beneath the valley floor, was simply gone. The seismic waves I sent down were not bouncing back, they were being swallowed. I recalibrated. I ran the scan again. The void remained, a perfect, hexagonal hole in my data. My breath caught in my throat. It was the exact geometric signature Kalen had theorized would be the hallmark of an artificial energy dampening field. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the habitat's life support. After 2 years of listening to nothing, the silence had finally answered back. My superior, Director Iria Askvig, was a woman whose pragmatism was as legendary as the Martian dust storms that sometimes threatened to swallow our small outpost whole. She had the weary, patient eyes of someone who had seen 1,000 thrilling anomalies explained away by faulty equipment, solar flares, or the simple, disappointing truth of the mundane. She had been a pioneer in her youth, one of the first to walk on this red world, but years of budget meetings and risk assessments had eroded the explorer, leaving the director. Her office was a shrine to efficiency, the walls bare except for a single, faded photograph of a younger, smiling area standing beside an early model rover, the Earth a tiny blue marble in the black sky behind her. I requested a formal meeting, laying out my findings on the main holographic display in her office. The perfect, glowing hexagon hung in the air between us, a stark, mathematical ghost. She barely glanced at it. "It's a geological fluke, Celeste," she said, her voice a tired rasp of logic against my burgeoning hope. Her focus was on her datapad, her fingers flicking through resource allocation charts. An uncatalogued metallic deposit, a freak of magnetic alignment. "Your array is probably reading its own energy feedback. Calibrate your instruments, run a diagnostic, and then run the scan again." "Director, I've run the diagnostic 3 times," I counted, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. "The energy readings are stable, but they're not a reflection. They're an absorption. Something down there is actively drinking the energy." She finally looked up, her gaze tired. "Dr. Rosek, we have a budget. I cannot authorize a multi-million credit excavation based on a sensor ghost. Bring me conclusive proof, and we'll talk. Until then, stick to your mission parameters." For the next 3 weeks, I became a phantom in the base, a ghost haunting my own lab. I lived on caffeine patches and nutrient paste, the taste of which I barely registered. The rest of the 150 souls at our base, the botanists, the engineers, the geologists, moved through their routines, their laughter in the mess hall a distant echo from a world I no longer inhabited. My world had been reduced to the hum of the servers and the beautiful, terrifying symmetry on my screen. I cross-referenced every known mineral, every theoretical geological formation, from the collected knowledge of Earth to the latest Xylosian deep core surveys. I ran simulations that pushed the base's processes to their limits. Nothing in the known universe behaved this way. I brought my final, irrefutable data not to Area, but to the base's chief engineer, Morgana Tower. Morgana was a woman of calm, unwavering resolve, a bedrock of logic and courage who thought in terms of stress tolerances, energy signatures, and the hard, physical laws of the universe. Her workshop was a chaotic cathedral of exposed wiring, half-assembled drones, and the smell of ozone, a stark contrast to the sterile data world of my lab. She looked at my data not with a scientist's curiosity, but with an engineer's critical, skeptical eye. She didn't speak for a full day. She took my data and ran her own simulations, using her own proprietary diagnostic programs. I watched as she translated my theoretical ghost into the language of power, mass, and thermodynamics. Finally, she swiveled in her chair, her face grim, her eyes holding a new, startling intensity. "The energy readings are impossible," she said, her voice a low, serious murmur that cut through the silence. "The amount of energy it's absorbing without any detectable thermal or radioactive emission defies the second law of thermodynamics." She leaned forward, pointing at a single, terrifying number on her screen. "But the data is also stable. The readings are consistent, precise, and not a feedback loop." She finally looked at me, and I saw a flicker of the same aura I felt. "Whatever is down there, Celeste, it's not natural." Morgana's validation was the key. It was the fulcrum on which the future of humanity would pivot. We went to Iria's office together. This time, there was no dismissal. Iria looked at my seismology, then at Morgana's energy analysis. She saw the same impossible truth reflected in the eyes of her chief scientist and her chief engineer. The explorer she had once been finally broke through the surface of the director. A slow, thin smile spread across her face, the first genuine smile I had seen from her in years. "Well, Morgana," she said, her voice a low, conspiratorial whisper. "It seems we're going digging." The decision sent a shockwave through the sterile, predictable routines of our base. Suddenly, the air was electric with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since we first made Planet Fall. The mobilization of the heavy-duty excavation rovers was an event of near-mythic significance. These colossal machines, usually reserved for large-scale habitat construction, had sat dormant for years. Now, their diesel-electric engines roared to life, a deep, guttural growl that felt like the awakening of some ancient, terrestrial beast. The dig became the central obsession of our small, isolated world. All non-essential work was halted. The botanists left their hydroponic gardens, the atmospheric scientists abandoned their weather models. We gathered in the observation dome, a congregation of 150 souls, our faces pressed against the triple-painted glass, watching the live feeds from the rovers on the main holographic display. It felt like the entire human race was holding its breath with us, watching through the fragile, million-mile thread of our data link. For days, the machine scraped away layers of Martian rock, their massive, diamond-tipped drills and grinders peeling back the planet's red skin. With each scoop, we were traveling back in time, through strata of dust and sediment that represented entire geological epochs. The centuries fell away, then the millennia, then the eons. The anticipation was a physical weight, a shared, silent prayer that echoed in the cavernous dome. We were no longer just scientists, we were archaeologists, unearthing a secret that had been kept for a time so vast it was almost incomprehensible. Finally, they hit something. The lead rover's massive drill, a tool designed to pulverize solid basalt, whined, its pitch rising to a piercing, metallic scream. A shower of brilliant, white sparks erupted from the drill head. Then, with a sound like a rifle crack, the drill tip shattered, the fragments of diamond alloy skittering across the rock. The report came back from the field technician, a grizzled, lifelong miner named Jax, his voice a stunned, breathless rasp over the con director. "We've hit something. The drill's gone. Whatever's down there, it's harder than anything I've ever seen." The atmosphere in the dome was electric. We were on the threshold. The slow, careful work began. High-pressure atmospheric jets were used to blow away the final layers of dust and sand, a delicate, surgical process that took weeks. We watched as the form beneath was slowly, reverently revealed. The order came down from the UN Space Command on Earth, a message that crackled across the void with the planet's collective, held breath, uncover it all. It took a year. A full Martian year of painstaking, nerve-wracking work. A year of revealing a structure so vast it dwarfed every pyramid and cathedral ever built by human hands. It was a gate. A colossal, hexagonal ring of obsidian-like material, its surface a perfect, unblemished black that seemed to swallow the harsh Martian sun, reflecting nothing. It was covered in channels and glyphs that defied any known language or mathematics, their patterns seeming to shift and writhe at the edge of my vision, a language written in the vocabulary of a higher dimension. It was dormant, but it felt alive, a sleeping leviathan buried in the red sands. It silenced a form of immense, patient power. At the base of the gate, we found a single, smaller plinth rising from the alien bedrock. It was made of the same impossible material, and on its surface, a recessed, hand-shaped indentation waited. It was a control panel. It was an invitation. A global debate raged, a firestorm of fear, hope, and speculation that consumed the news feeds for months. Was it a weapon, a final, dormant doomsday device? Was it a tomb, a monument to a dead race? Or was it a doorway to hell, a Pandora's box that, once opened, could never be closed? Scientists, philosophers, theologians, and politicians all weighed in, their voices a cacophony of human anxiety. The responsibility, the final, terrifying honor, fell to Morgana Tower. As the base's chief engineer, she was the one who understood energy, who understood systems. As the one who had confirmed my impossible data, her connection to the artifact was second only to my own. If anyone could face the unknown with a steady hand and a clear mind, it was her. The day of the activation was treated with the solemnity of a moon landing and the tension of a bomb disposal. All non-essential personnel were confined to the Habitat Central Blast Shelter. I stood beside Director Osvig in the forward observation deck, a position of privilege I had earned with my obsession. My hands were pressed against the cold, triple-painted glass, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The fate of our entire species, the future of our tiny, lonely race felt balanced on this one quiet moment. Clad in her spacesuit, Morgana walked across the excavated site, a single, small figure in a landscape of giants. She moved with a practiced, deliberate calm, her steps leaving the first human footprints in the dust that had settled around the alien structure. She knelt before the plinth. She paused, her helmeted head bowed for a long moment, a silent, respectful communication with a species dead for 1 billion years. Then, with a slow, steady motion, she pressed the palm of her glove into the indentation. For a moment, nothing happened. The silence stretched, deep and absolute. I held breath spanning a solar system. My own lungs burned. I watched, my entire being focused on the scene before me, waiting for the world to end, or to begin. A low, resonant hum began. It was not a sound that came through the habitat's reinforced walls or the thin Martian air. It was a vibration that seemed to emanate from the very core of the planet, a deep, foundational thrum that I felt in my bones, in the fluid of my inner ear, in the fillings of my teeth. The ground beneath our feet trembled, not with the jarring shock of a quake, but with the steady, powerful thrum of some colossal, awakening machine. On the excavated plain, the glyphs etched into the surface of the colossal ring began to glow. A soft, internal, blue-white light filled the channels, pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm like the heartbeat of a newborn star. The light was clean, pure, and utterly alien. It cast long, dancing shadows across the valley, making the familiar red landscape seem strange and new. The air inside the frame of the gate began to shimmer. It was like watching heat haze rise from blackest velvet, a distortion in the very fabric of space. The shimmering intensified, coalescing, pulling inward, not into a view of another place, but into a wound in reality itself, a perfect, stable, and utterly starless circle of pure black. It was a hole in the universe, a doorway to nothing, and it was the most terrifying and beautiful thing I had ever seen. The silence in the control room was absolute, broken only by the sharp, ragged breaths of the 20 souls inside. I could see Morgana on a live feed, still kneeling before the plinth, her helmet turned towards the impossible void she had just summoned. She was a high priestess at an altar to an unknown god. A drone, tethered by a thick, armored data cable, was our first emissary into the unknown. We watched on the main screen as the small, spidery machine rolled to the edge of the portal. It paused there, its optical sensors trying to make sense of the perfect, featureless black. It was as if it, a machine of pure logic, was hesitating, sensing the sheer wrongness of the void ahead. Then, with a quiet lurch, it plunged through. For a few heart-stopping seconds, the feed was a chaotic storm of static, a scream of nonsensical data that made the technicians flinch. The numbers on our screens became gibberish. The laws of physics, as we understood them, had been temporarily suspended. Then, with a final, jarring flicker, the image stabilized. A collective gasp went through the room, a single, shared breath of utter astonishment. The drone was floating in a place that should not exist. It was a vast, spherical, non-space, utterly silent and devoid of stars. There was no up or down, only a sense of immense, hollow infinity, a cathedral of perfect emptiness. It was a space between spaces, a hub at the center of everything. And the walls of this impossible sphere were not walls. They were gateways. Over 1,000 other hexagonal rings, identical to the one on Mars, lined the interior of the void, each one a silent, shimmering promise. They were arranged in a perfect, celestial lattice, a honeycomb of possibilities. Some pulsed with a soft, green light, hinting at verdant, living worlds within. Others swirled with the deep, violent red of a nebula, gateways to cosmic chaos. A few were as black as the space between them, doorways to an even deeper mystery. The drone's camera turned back. Through the shimmering portal it had just entered, I could see the red dust of Mars, the glaring lights of the excavation site, on our own tiny, white-suited figures staring back at ourselves from across an impossible threshold. We were looking out from a single, dusty room into a hall of 1,000 doors, each leading to a different universe. The truth settled over me, over all of us, with the force of a religious revelation. The artifact in the Marana Valley, a name that now felt so small, so inadequate, was not a bridge from one world to another. It was the key, the entrance to a central, cosmic way station, a galactic transit hub built by a long-dead, impossibly advanced race we would come to call the Architects. They were gone, but they had left the lights on. They had bequeathed to us the ultimate inheritance, 1,000 doors to 1,000 new worlds. In the control room, surrounded by the stunned, silent faces of my colleagues, I stared at the screen, at the thousand shimmering possibilities. The age of humanity being a single-planet species, a lonely toddler in a vast, empty house, was over. The great, lonely silence of the universe, the silence I had dedicated my life to listening to, had been a lie. My life's work was complete. But as I looked at the endless, silent doorways, a single, thrilling, and terrifying thought echoed in my mind, a thought that would soon grip all of humanity. The age of questions was over. The age of answers and the age of consequences was about to begin.